Welcome back to Strange Stories with the Seeker and the Skeptic. Today we have with us Liz Bennett, who is a friend from my hometown. She reached out to us to share with us some stories about strange things that happened in an apartment she lived in a few years back. So, welcome to the show, Liz. We're really glad to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
So, tell us about the apartment that you lived in and the strange things that happened there.
So it started out pretty normal stuff. Friend of mine and I got an apartment around June 2017. And, it wasn't anything too major, just a basic apartment complex in the city we lived in. And things were going normal. And, probably around July, my boyfriend at the time, now husband, moved in with us. And my roommate ended up moving out around October of that same year. Like I said, everything was going normal. We had our daily routines, going to work, stuff like that. But after a couple months, stuff kind of got a little weird, I guess. Where I would start seeing things. And at first, I thought, oh, maybe I'm just paranoid because it wasn't just like some of the stories that you see where people are like, oh, I saw some very clear image of a Victorian style woman standing in the corner. It was, just corner my eye little glimpse of some wispy type ethereal looking thing. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm just seeing things. I tried to play on the logic side. Like, all right, this is suspicious, but it is what it is. And it wasn't until my dog and cat at the time actually started reacting to it too that I'm like, okay, is this something more? Because the first apartment in this complex that we lived in, it was on the second story, and the apartments all had three stories in total. So ours was in the middle level. And, I'm like, all right, maybe it was just headlights or something shining through the window, just trying to find a logical basis to, ground what I was seeing in, because I'm like, all right, this, it's not anything crazy. I was doing research. The apartment complex was built in like the 1970s. So I'm like, a little too soon. There wasn't any like mysterious deaths or anything like that really popped up. So I'm like, okay, it can't be ghosts, right? Like it seems too far-fetched. But I kept seeing it, the animals kept responding, and that's what really caught my attention was how they would respond. My dog, he recently passed away, but he was my emotional service dog. And so he kept me grounded a lot. And so the fact that he was reacting to it kind of had me spooked. And I brought it up to my husband, and he's a skeptic. So he's like, oh, it's probably nothing. But he started seeing it too. And, same thing, just out of the corner of his eye, he'd see little glimpses of something. And over time, it slowly got more and more, like you more and more clear. Like you kind of see it was like almost like a fluffy tail that would like run by our bedroom door. And we were like, what was that? And like you just barely just catch it disappear. That's so odd. And it kept going on, and we kept seeing it here and there, and it slowly but surely got more and more clear. Then, probably around February of 2018, we moved to a different building in the same complex. It was just a couple buildings down, but this time we were on the third floor, very high up. So it took the complete logical basis of, oh, it was probably just somebody's headlights. Because when people pulled in, you couldn't see headlights from that high up anymore. I'm like, all right, so what are we seeing? And we hadn't told the kids. My husband has kids that would come over on weekends, my stepchildren. And we hadn't said anything to them because they were young and impressionable. We didn't want to startle them and have them have night terrors or anything like that. But then they started seeing it, and they're like, oh, I saw like something look like a cat or something or a rat run into the bathroom. Like, oh yeah, what did it look like? And they would describe the same exact thing we saw, like a wispy, fluffy thing that just disappeared. And we had to like play it off so that we didn't scare them. But it kept getting more and more clear, and eventually we just saw it. It looked like a cat, like a white fluffy cat. I'm like, that's so bizarre. What is going on? And it my husband still tried to like blow it off of, oh, we're just seeing things. It could be like a vape cloud or something like that out of the corner of our eye. I'm like, oh, maybe that makes sense. But it wasn't until what really, really had me convinced was the cat that we had at the time. She'd be a little bit crazy from time to time and just chase stuff, just shadows and whatnot, and dust particles in the living room area. she started acting nuts out there. I'm like, okay, she's probably playing with a toy, chasing something, basic cat behavior. So I'm just, hanging out in bed. And then she was doing all that. But then out of the corner of my eye, I watched this ghostly cat figure sprint into the room and disappear right as it like met my bed. And our cat tore in like crazy and jumped on the bed too, right where the thing disappeared and started attacking the blanket. And I was like, what the heck was that? And it just minor stuff like that. It wasn't anything super scary that happened that made me terrified to live there. It was just like a weird occurrence that happened frequently. And conveniently, we ended up leaving that apartment complex and getting our house um, closer to December 2018, and we haven't seen it since. So the whole thing was just a very weird phenomena that occurred. And I'm just, thinking back on it, I'm like, was it a ghost? Was it not? Because I consider myself on the fence between skeptic and seeker, but I'm more seeker leaning because there's just a lot of different things in the world that don't make sense that I try to make sense of. So, you know, I'd like to think that maybe it was just a little ghost cat saying hello, but maybe I was just seeing a vape cloud or something, but you never know. I think the world has a lot of secrets.
Definitely. There's a couple of things about your story that I find super interesting. So the first, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like when your roommate was living there, you had not seen this ghost kitty or whatever it was. You had not seen this yet. Is that correct?
Yeah, as far as I know, I hadn't seen it before, but to be fair, when her and I lived together, her bedroom was like right across the hall from mine. So when I was home and wasn't at work, I had my bedroom door closed for privacy. So it could have been there, but she never
Gotcha.
said anything about seeing it. So, maybe it wasn't there. We were just oblivious to it. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense that it was just kind of a different environment. So, once that shifted, things might change about what you were seeing. But the fact that it followed you, it sounds like, I mean, because what are the chances that there's two ghost cat
Yeah.
apparitions in the same, same complex? So that's super interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that you saw it in two places on the same property. It kind of makes you wonder what that property was before it was, a block of apartment buildings. I mean, if it was, had previous to that, if it had been like a larger house or something, maybe that was just, shows the energy of something that had kind of roamed that area, and that could be why you didn't see it subsequent to that. Really interesting to me that your pet cat also seemed to be interacting with it.
Yeah, that's what got me too, because, people are very quick to, they see something and they immediately jump to a conclusion.
Yeah.
But to me, when a pet is reactive to it, it kind of gets me more on the, seeker side of things rather than the skeptic because they don't have the like bias that humans do where they're exposed to, ghost stories and, media and stuff that's like, oh, ghosts, ghosts, ghosts. So for me, when they're in tune with something like that, that's when I'm like, all right, like what's going on here? Is there something more?
Yeah,
Hmm.
definitely.
Cats also see a much larger spectrum of light than we do, just like dogs
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Most animals have better vision in that sense than us. And so I think a lot of the times, like a lot of what we call like spirits or ghosts or something, probably are something along the lines of what we think, but we don't have a way to measure it yet, so it gets kind of, ignored. But if we had a way to kind of go into different spectrums of vision somehow, I think that we would see that there's more going on.
Oh yeah, I agree. There's so many theories that I've tried to research to kind of make sense of it, but obviously, nobody has a definitive answer. So I'm just piecing things together, much like I do with UFO stuff too. It's just I want to know.
Yeah, we do too. For sure. Well, and I grew up in a house that my parents built, and there was a lot of strange phenomenon in that household. And one of the things did appear to be a small shadow animal, so it was definitely cat sized or a small dog size. And our dogs would often just sit, you know, staring down the hallway at nothing. We couldn't see anything, but they would be like staring like there was something down there, so I do think animals definitely can see or sense, a lot more than what we can. It's just, it's interesting, and it's, I like that you're keeping your mind open to, you know, asking the questions because Jonathan will say, like, him being a skeptic doesn't mean he doesn't believe people or their experiences. It's more about, like, how are we, like, what conclusions are we drawing from those experiences?
Right.
It could be a ghost kitty, or it could be, who knows, like a different dimension is popping over and you can kind of see into that a little bit. Like there's a lot of different, I think, explanations of what it could be. And
Oh, for
all,
sure.
yeah, all are interesting to play around with and think about.
Yeah.
What about your husband, the skeptic? What 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 conclusions did he draw, or does he still kind of not believe?
He's kind of back and forth about it. Like he'll admit straightforward, like, he did see something, but whether or not it was a ghost something or just something that could be logically explained, he's not for sure. So he will tell you, oh, ghosts aren't real. Like, I'm very dubious of their existence. But at the same time, he does know that there's a lot of strange stuff that happened. I mean, even the house we live in now, when he was a kid, there was strange stuff that happened. But since we've lived here, not a whole lot has happened, but it's just like one of those things where I can't help but be like, okay, but you've had all these experiences. How could you not be more of a seeker than a skeptic? But he's a very logical man, so he's always, there's got to be a reason. Like we watch a lot of different shows, like BuzzFeed shows, stuff like that, where they do like ghost hunting and stuff like that, and we'll sit there and watch it and he'll be like, okay, well, that very clearly could be just heat signatures that, are caused by a heating vent, or the noise that they hear could be, the piping creaking and stuff like that. And he
Hmm.
has a lot of knowledge in construction and that sort of stuff and has worked on a lot of older buildings. So there's a lot of different occurrences that people have shown on TV and stuff where he'll be like, oh, there's a very logical explanation for that. That makes complete sense, if you look at it from the logical side. But there are some things where it's just like, okay, that is very suspicious because, I never delved in with like the fancy gadgets and gizmos that they use to get, heat signatures or, the tracings where they can get like the figure shapes and everything like that. But there's just some stuff where I'm like, okay, there's got to be more to it because
Hmm.
it can't just be just always a logical explanation that is definitive. And there's a lot of stuff that we don't understand in life. We've existed for thousands of years, but there's still so much that goes unseen and unheard. And like Jonathan was saying, like pets, for example, they can see a different spectrum of light. So when they're in tune to that, maybe it's just because we're not capable of seeing it and some people are. And for me, that ties me into the whole like your mind's eye. And like there are some people who are more susceptible to seeing that stuff. And so, while my husband is a skeptic, I do think that there is a part of him that does believe more than he leads on.
It sounds like he's curious just for him
Yeah.
to watch those shows with you. It says like, there's those different parts. Like there's the skeptical part that's like, no, this is not real. And then there's a part that's like, hmm.
For sure.
I was gonna say, I think he's right to be skeptical of some of those shows, you know, be and not all of them, but some of the shows that are out there, I think they jump to conclusions a little bit too quickly about what things are because they're putting on a show, right? Like it's not
Yep.
great television to be like, nope, none of this is real, there are no ghosts here. Like, you know, I think the shows that I haven't seen any of the BuzzFeed ones, but like the shows that I tend to believe a little bit more are the ones that are actively trying, like they're actively trying to come up with the logical explanations. And when they can't come up with the logical explanations, then they're just like, okay, maybe there is something else going on here.
Yeah, I feel that too, because that's basically like the show we watched, that was BuzzFeed, the two guys that did it. One was a seeker and one was a skeptic.
Uh,
And they ended up leaving BuzzFeed and now they have their own series. And it's so interesting to watch because the one guy, he's very much, oh, ghosts are real, and they'll go and visit um like I think they did the Amityville Horror House and stuff like that. They've done a bunch of different haunted houses and stuff, but the skeptic Shane, he'll be like, no. And there's there's no such things as ghosts, but it's just so interesting to watch and see because sometimes there are things where the believer is just like, oh, that was definitely something. And the skeptic's like, okay, but there wasn't though. Like, you know, but there are some things where he's just like, ghosts aren't real, but I don't know. I don't know what that was.
I can't explain that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And those are the ones I like because I don't
Yeah.
know, they seem more truthful and wholesome because it's not like the ones that are out there where it's just they're pushing that, oh yeah, no, that was totally something and it was, just a squirrel or something in the ceiling because it was an abandoned
Yeah.
factory or abandoned prison or what have you. And
Absolutely.
there's some where I've literally seen on camera where they're like, oh, that looked like an orb, but you look closely and you can see that it's the rear end of a raccoon walking through. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, like that was clearly not a ghost.
Yep. Absolutely.
Well, I think there's definitely something to be said about, using what you can to filter out the things that are easily or plausibly mundane things. So I think that skepticism in that is the place for skepticism. The difference for me is when you get to a point where there's something that you can't use those methods to get out of. And every once in a while, you'll come across something either in the personal experience that you have or in something like a film or a TV show that will have those elements that you can't take out with, well, this is from a heating vent. This is a draft. This is someone starting their car 6 blocks away. This is an echo, things like that. An example for me of that, at least, you talk about liking to watch stuff like this. There is a film you can see on like Amazon Prime called The House in Between. It's about this. It's an investigation of this house. Was it Brittany? Was it Georgia or South Carolina?
I don't remember.
It's either Georgia or South Carolina, but it's some somewhat famous like paranormal investigator quote unquote people went and filmed. I think they actually did 2 films there, and some of it like you can tell that the typical stuff you see in a lot of those shows where they're trying to find something wasn't there. That it's handled in a completely different way. It's handled, and they bring in actual scientists and ask them questions. A lot of times the scientists are kind of laughing and they'll be like, "Why are you asking me this? This doesn't sound like science to me." But then they'll give an opinion, and you just take the opinion for what it is, an opinion. But that would be one that I would suggest to people who are interested in looking at one where they try to use those methods and can't quite come to a real conclusion. And Brittany will tell you, you give me 5 minutes into what's that one called, Ghost Adventures?
Whatever Zach Baggins show
Yeah, we
is.
got 10 minutes into that, and I was like, I can't watch this anymore. This guy is just a complete charlatan. This guy is just
Yeah.
he's a faker. No, thank you. I had no idea how that guy ended up popular and famous, but here we are. Um, but then there's stuff like The House in Between or Hellier, which is you can also find on Amazon Prime, things like that, where these people are being earnest and showing you things that they can't explain, and some of it makes them seem really silly. And so, and with this kind of stuff, you have to be willing to look silly, which can be difficult for me sometimes because I'm a fairly serious person overall. Um, I take myself very seriously at least, and so that being in that place of allowing yourself to look a little bit on the foolish side, just in the effort of telling the truth, is going to be where you're at with this stuff a lot as well.
Right.
that the house in between was actually in Mississippi.
Ah, I was wrong.
It was some southern state.
Some
Yeah.
southern state.
No, that one was definitely a really interesting. I think they actually had two movies that they put out,
It
but
was.
that one was really interesting for me because they seem to go through any kind of logical explanation, right? Is it the foundation? Is there something electrical going on? So they really tried to do their due diligence. It was with I'm not gonna remember his name. The guy from Ghost, one of the guys from Ghost Hunters. Steve, I believe. But yeah, that one was definitely
The
um
ghost hunter guy that seems like a sincere person, as
yes.
opposed to the other one.
Yeah. Yeah. But what you're talking about, Liz, too, the BuzzFeed show, or well, whatever their new show is, that seems interesting to me as well, just having the it's like they have a balance, right? Of
Yeah.
somebody who's a firm believer and somebody who's going to ask maybe some more questions. And that's what we're trying to do on this show as well.
Yeah, I love it because the BuzzFeed, I believe it was BuzzFeed Unsolved. They
Uh-huh.
had two shows. One was an unsolved like mysteries one, and the other one was more of a like paranormal investigations one. But now they have a channel on YouTube that I follow. It's called Watcher, but it's Ryan Bergara and Shane Madej, and they're both, Ryan is the believer and Shane is the skeptic, and they go through and they're very, very in depth of their research and stuff like that before they go, and they do like independent walkthroughs of all these different haunted places, and it's just I really appreciate it because like you said, like how they really go in and they have the almost like balance of like believer and non-believer. So, you get somebody who's like, oh no, like that definitely had to have been ghost related, something paranormal. And then you have the skeptics like, okay, but let's think about this with a logical lens. This house was built, how long ago? Oh, over 100 years ago. The plumbing's probably poor. The electrical's probably poor. Drafts,
Hmm.
vents, that sort of thing. Stray animals, rats, mice, squirrels, what have you. Something, that does exist, that we have proof that exists, that could be the cause of the issue and the cause of what we're seeing or hearing. So it's just, having that balance, it makes it all the more believable to me because then you can see it from both sides. Then you can really, have more of an unbiased viewpoint because you are getting, the believer side versus the skeptic.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important if for anybody that's doing that kind of like investigation,
Yeah.
to have that balance and to ask the questions. And so where do you land? You said that you're you're kind of in the middle, seeker and skeptic. You know, we'll just pretend like say ghosts are real. Like what are your beliefs about them or the afterlife?
It's a very, you know, I guess fluid would be the best way to describe it, viewpoint. I obviously have some skepticism about, paranormal stuff, but I definitely consider myself more seeker leaning. Ghosts and UFO stuff, those two things are some of the things that I really like to do research in because it just interests me. And I can't remember where the quote is from, but I heard once that magic is just science that hasn't been discovered yet. And that's something that really I own in my soul because there's stuff being discovered every day.
Yep.
And, with when it comes down to ghosts, I've had my own personal experiences that I can't explain aside from just the cat at the apartment. So for me, it's like, okay, is there something more or is there not? And I've tried doing research and stuff like that. I've come up with my own theories, like Einstein's law of conservation of energy, that energy can neither be created or destroyed. It just changes from the physical form, such as for people, when we die, our physical body decomposes or we're cremated, that physical energy is converted. Um, but what about our soul? And obviously
Hmm.
that opens up a whole different can of worms of whether or not, we have souls and stuff like that because it becomes more of like a um belief type situation because not everyone believes that souls are real, and that's, everyone to each their own. But for me, I personally believe that people have souls, animals have souls. And if I try to think about the conservation of energy law, something's got to happen to that energy. So what is it? And, maybe it's just the physical body, is recycled how it is, and the, soul itself is just a little blip that's left roaming Earth. And, or maybe not. Maybe I'm completely wrong, but there's just so much where I'm just like, okay, it could be more, it could be less, but that's one of the main things that I'm like, maybe that's what it is. And the other theory I have too is, maybe time just is, past and present, maybe they go along at the same time. And what we're seeing is just, thinnings in the veil between past and present where we're catching that glimpse. Because there's a lot of stories that I've read from people who've had paranormal experiences and sightings that, they'll see a ghost that has a similar routine, like they'll walk down the same hallway and stuff like that. And if it's just, like a thumbprint in time, maybe that's why they're seeing it redundantly. Maybe that is the whole explanation for it. But I'm really curious to see as time goes on if there is more that will come out, because there's just so much that's unexplained that I wish we had more answers for, because although I do have a little bit of, skepticism, excuse me, about it, there is still a lot of, like I said, seeker leaning where part of me wants to believe that there's just more to it than just the mundane, we wake up, we eat, we live, then we die, and that's the end. So, part of me likes to think that there's more.
Absolutely. I think both of those theories are your thought process in both of those things are very solid, and we just don't have the scientific proof yet. But I mean, there are a lot of scientists that will say time just is exactly what you said, of the past, the present, the future are all happening at the exact same time. We just experience it in a linear format, but that doesn't mean that that's actually what's happening, in every dimension, in every, that doesn't mean that's what's really happening.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's a really interesting theory of just seeing kind of like a glimpse into the past, seeing into a different dimension.
Right.
What were some of those other experiences that you've had outside of the cat?
Well, one that was really, really suspicious, another one that my husband and I bared witness to, and my roommate who we had the apartment together with was there too. At the time, there wasn't a Taco Bell in the town that we lived in. And, being young, that was one of our favorite things before I had kids was late night Taco Bell runs and Walmart trips. So we would drive, probably about 45 minutes away to the closest Taco Bell and Walmart that just happened to be like right in the same parking lot. And, we would just hang out, and my husband was driving, I was in the passenger seat, and it was my former roommate and a friend of ours in the back seats. And we were on our way back from our Taco Bell and Walmart run. And it was dark. It was probably getting close to 2 in the morning because we would go in the middle of the night, as crazy kids do. But we were driving down this road, and it was like your basic country road, middle of the woods, swamps on either side of the road, not a whole lot of, houses and stuff like that. But it was just weird because my husband was driving and we were, just hanging out, talking, listening to music, and we saw what looked like a man on the side of the road. And then, you know, for a split second in between blinks, like I don't know how else to describe it, but it was like he was at the side of the road, we blinked, and then he was in the center of the road, and then he was gone.
Mm.
And my husband and I looked at each other and we were like, "Did you see that?" Like at the same time. So we were like, okay, that was weird. Like, was it just the fog? But to me, like what I saw, it looked a lot more humanoid in shape. But we chalked it up to, maybe it was a person who was just walking down the road. Because, that's people walk down the road sometimes in the middle of the night if they are going from one place to the other, normal mundane things. Um, but the two friends in the back seat didn't see anything because they weren't paying attention. So it was just my husband and I that had seen it. And they were like, "Oh, what if it was a ghost?" And we're like, "Oh, well, that I'm I'm on the fence. It might have been. But we were making jokes about it and saying that we were seeing things and it was, just all willy-nilly. Oh, it was totally a ghost. But the more we thought about it and talked about what we saw, like there was no doubt my husband and I saw the exact same shape. And it looked to me, especially, and from my recollection, it was a almost like older looking man who was at the side of the road, and then he was in the center of the road, and then he was gone. And there was no trace of him whatsoever. So to me, it was like, that's a ghost. Like, how else do you explain something like that that was very distinctly like almost humanoid in shape? And, obviously my husband being more skeptic was like, oh no, it was, we were just seeing things that's crazy. But again, what really had me going out of my mind trying to find an answer for it was about a week or two later, there was a news article where a body was found of an elderly man who had passed away in the woods right on that stretch of road.
Hmm.
Whoa.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where I was just kind of like, oh, because like my heart sank because the ghost cat, that stuff happened. Like that was, just a
Yeah.
very, you know, innocent type thing. I never had any like spooky things, but then to see a person that was at the side of the road, in the road, gone, and then to see somebody who somewhat matched the description even had gone and, passed away, it raised a lot of questions and a lot of different ideas in my head of like, well, did we actually see him? Like, did we see him before he passed away? Did we see his spirit? Was he trying to tell us that he was like he had passed away and was trying to like lead us to find him? Like, should we have done something about it? Were we just crazy? Just the running through all those different questions and trying to like make sense of it all. But at the end of the day, I'm still on the fence about it. My husband thinks, it was probably just our imagination, but it was such a wild coincidence that I'm still under the impression that, maybe it was his spirit or his energy leaving that little final imprint, just saying like, hey, I'm still here.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to chalk it up to imagination when you're both seeing the exact same thing,
Exactly.
and like a person walking across the street, it's not going to happen in two blinks of an eye. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you're going to see them walking, especially if it's like an elderly person, they're probably not going to be moving all, all that fast,
Right.
So I mean, it does sound like there was something there and just that connection with, what you found out later, that's very interesting and
Yeah, it
sad.
definitely had me
Okay.
spooked, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting. Again, there could be several explanations because, going back to what you said before, like, was that just seeing a glitch in the timeline? Was it that, or was it actually like a spirit that or part of a spirit? Like, who knows? There's a lot of different explanations, but it does sound like it was a strange occurrence.
Yeah, for sure.
So, this is a little bit in a different direction, but you said that you really love investigating about like UFOs and stuff like that, which is something that we love as well. So, tell us, like, what are your theories
Oh
about the
boy.
UFOs and the strange things in the sky?
I have plenty of theories about that. I don't really have any experiences seeing UFOs personally. Um, but my husband does. He saw something, well, his parents and I think it was his brother saw something that was in the sky, and a lot of people in the area actually saw it too. This is probably in the 90s, where it was just something in the sky that flew off and they tried chasing it down, but it was going way too fast for them to, catch up with. And they were convinced that it was a UFO. But aside from that, for me personally, I watch a lot of Ancient Aliens, History Channel, Giorgio Tsoukalos, and there's a lot of theories that have me leaning more in the believing side of UFOs and aliens and stuff like that. I'd argue probably I'm more of a firm believer in aliens than I am in ghosts. Um, Only because there's just so much history that depicts these different things that don't make sense. Like one thing that stood out to me, I believe it was on Ancient Aliens that I saw, and I might be wrong on this, but I think it was an ancient Inca civilization who had a turtle come from the sky that gave them insight on, I think it was like farming and stuff like that. And thinking about what I know about UFOs and stuff like that and ancient civilizations and just human nature, if we see something that we've never seen before, we try to chalk it up and compare it in description to something that we understand.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you think an ancient civilization like that and thinking about what UFOs stereotypically are depicted as is like the hovering discs, a turtle shell and a hovering disc look very similar in my opinion. So, maybe it was a UFO that they saw. And, the other thing too about ancient civilizations is there's a whole lot of UFO theories with ancient Egypt too. But the difference between ancient civilizations and present times is ancient civilizations didn't have social media or television, just media as a whole to have the hyped up theories and all that, oh, I saw this. Oh yeah, me too. And like where people kind of skew truths and fabricate stories and stuff like that for fame and glory. Um, so, when you're thinking, say, like I was saying, ancient Egypt and like ancient Inca civilizations, you're talking two different sides of the globe who have history depicting things coming from the sky that gave aid and helped them like develop as a society. So to me it seems like it's a lot harder to fabricate a story like that that's so similar. Like I'm sure there is some fabrication because humans a lot of times fabricate stories, but
Mm-hmm.
there's just so many like similarities between different civilizations where it's not like they were writing letters across the world to each other and being like, oh, I saw this. And
Right.
then, it spread like wildfire. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, these two groups of people had no contact with each other. Some of these groups of people existed in completely different times, yet they have such similar experiences. So to me, it's like, I would like to believe that aliens do exist and that they have been watching and observing us because, maybe humans are the missing link in the evolutionary sequence. Maybe, we're just their science experiment that they're just observing, but part of the reason we haven't really uncovered them is because in order for them to get here, they obviously would have extremely advanced technology. So obviously we wouldn't be able to really detect them or see them because they would be way more ahead of us with their advancements.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not seeing them unless they want us to see them, I think.
Exactly.
Where do you think they're coming from?
Probably somewhere light years away. Not really quite sure where. I've seen a lot of different movies and shows. Like I remember when I was in earth science class, we watched the movie Contact,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I believe it was Alpha Centauri they were talking about, or Vega that the aliens came from. They were sending the messages from and stuff like that. So, maybe they're coming from places far off like that, but I'm always curious to see because I feel like one of these days it's gonna come out that, aliens are real because I feel, I don't know, maybe I'm too wrapped up in my beliefs about aliens at least, but I feel like it's almost asinine to think that we are the only sentient life force in the existence of the infinite new universe. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no way that planet Earth is it, and that's the
Mm-hmm.
only form of sentient life that exists. There's got to be something.
Definitely. I am with you there. I think again, it's one of those areas where we don't have all the answers. I'm sure there's people out there who do know more than they're letting
Oh,
us,
probably.
letting on. But, and I mean, there's even been things in recent years about people from higher levels of government saying, like, we have more information than what we've been sharing, so I think there is definitely more to it. But what
Yeah,
that is and where they're coming from and, all of that, I think still remains to be discovered.
for sure. those declassifieds that they released were very interesting. And to see that like the Air Force and the Navy have visual recordings, or the I can't remember where it was, but it was in the US where the nuclear stuff was getting messed with, but they had no explanation for it. And
Hmm.
personally, I don't think that if aliens are real that they would intend to do harm. I feel like they probably recognize that nuclear warfare is a tragic event
Hmm.
and would be world ending, and maybe they're trying to stop us from ending ourselves by, political disagreements and the stuff that goes on in our world day to day. But, you know, something I'm
Yeah,
very interested in, that's for sure.
me too. And I mean, I think you're right. Like, if they intended harm, well, I mean, okay. I guess I lean, there's probably lots of different aliens. So that's my thought, anyways. But like, if they intended harm, they would have already done it. But then I do think about people who've been like abducted and they've had experiments done on them, so that doesn't seem all too benevolent. But I don't think that it's probably, you know, every single species of aliens, does intend harm. And to them, it maybe it's like you said, like we're a science experiment, and so they don't see anything wrong with probing, but and taking people out of their beds at night or whatever. But, to us, that's not cool.
Right.
Well, awesome. This has been a fun conversation. I love just hearing your stories and hearing your different theories, and different questions that you have. So thank you for doing this with us today.
Oh, not a problem. I appreciate you guys having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk about your book at all, or is that something you're not ready to talk about?
I can talk about it a little bit. I'm
Okay.
still waiting on copyright to go through, so I haven't
Okay.
been public about, a whole lot, but I've got two books down that I'm waiting for the copyright to come out on. And I have a couple others that I have a first draft of, one that I've kind of been going through and tweaking a little bit, and I have another whole book that I've done, that I'm starting on the next book of that series. So it's just kind of like going back and forth. But the first two books that I wrote, my husband proofread and stuff before getting me an editing app to go through, and there was a lot of just minute typos having to go through and fix like double spaces and all that. But I'm very interested to see it because he's a very, very what's the word I want to use? He's very judgmental when it comes to literature. He's a very picky reader. So for me, it was, trying to come up with a universe that didn't have loopholes and would make sense, that he could pick apart and not have anything to be like, oh yeah, this is definitely an issue. And it was funny because the whole reason I started writing was because I had been reading a lot of books and dark fantasy and paranormal romance. That's my thing. I love reading them because I like living in a world, at least when I'm reading, that is outside of the norm, the mundane norm. And so, like, I know you and I have a lot of similar favorites, like
Yep.
the Mortal Instruments and
Yep.
stuff like that. Big favorite of mine, but just reading them. And there was a lot of different books that I was reading on this app called Wattpad because I like reading books there because there's just a lot of up and coming authors that haven't gotten with a publisher or haven't self-published, that they have them on there for free. And so I would read them, but I had the issue where a lot of the books were a little bit too provocative, I guess. They would go into a lot of like sexual stuff, and it gets kind of a little bit too much for me. So I'm like, all right, this is getting a little much. And I had read so much. Like I was just banging out books, like at least two a week. And it got to the point where I was getting less and less that I could find interest in that wasn't, just full on like bordering 50 Shades of Grey, but with
Yeah.
vampires or something like that. And so I was actually complaining to my husband, and I'm like, this is getting really frustrating that I'm trying to find a book that has a good storyline, but isn't just filled with sex scenes.
Yeah.
I'm not looking forward to reading just sex scene. And I was, ranting and raving about it, and he basically dared me. He was like, because I made the side comment, you know, I feel like I could crank a book out in 6 months that was a decent read that wasn't just filled with sex scenes. And, you know, he challenged me. He said, you know, authors spend years writing these books. Like, it's not like they just sit down and write and it's out and done. Like, you know, they spend a lot of time writing these books. And I was like, oh, well, I feel like I could write one in under 6 months. And he, you know, gave me the classic challenge of do it, you won't. So I did. I typed my whole first book, which is I think 400 something pages. Um, I typed that up on my phone in under a month.
Wow.
So, but you know, it's very I like the story. He actually really liked the story. It's not for the meek heart, and I'm gonna have to have a maturity rating on it because there are some like there's mature content. I touch base on a lot of like mental illness and stuff. But you know, just kind of getting that, you know, it still has some relatable aspects. I feel like my characters are really relatable, but it also has that paranormal twist where it's like, okay, well, here's where things get extra interesting.
Mhm. Awesome. Well, we can't wait for that to come out and to check it out. So, do you have a way for people to follow you so they can kind of stay like up to date about when you're going to release?
I have a Facebook page. It's just my Elizabeth Bennett page, where I have kind of given just one or two posts talking about how I'm going to be releasing books through Amazon. I'm going to go the Kindle Direct Publishing route. I've seen a lot of great things about it. It seems like that's a very, um, you know, beneficial platform to use. It seems like there's a lot of people who have had success there.
Yeah.
I also have been trying to get a TikTok in order to kind of get more people on there. But since I don't have a lot to go with and I don't want to share like trailers or teasers or anything of that nature until I have my copyright protection, I haven't really been too much on it, but I feel like once my copyright gets approved, I'll probably try to publish the first book and then do teasers and stuff like that to get more of an audience and hopefully get some readers to be invested in my stories.
Awesome. Well, we can't wait, and we'll link your Facebook page in the show notes so that people can follow you and
Oh, that's
check out
sweet.
your yeah, absolutely.
I can send you the links for those too.
Okay. Awesome. Very good.
Cool.
Well, we are excited to check them out when they're ready to be out in the world.
Yay.
All right, Liz. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. This was a really good conversation, and we appreciate it so much.
Well, I appreciate you guys for having me. It was actually awesome.
It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for talking with us. Hope you have a nice day.
You as well. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for being here. If you have a strange story you want to share with us, email us at seekerandskeptic@gmail.com. We look forward to talking to you soon.